Dean James, thank you so much for joining. Especially now more than ever, you stand for so much as it relates for diversity, equity, inclusion, and just moving Wharton forward as a stronger community. So we feel incredibly fortunate to have you with us here today. I'd love for you to you need no introduction, but I'd love for you to share a little bit more about your background before we get started in today's event, as we do have some folks who are joining who are newer to the Wharton experience and newer to this community.
Wonderful, thank you. Well, I'm delighted to be here. I apologize that it took me a minute to get connected, but so many wonderful faces, and thrilled to be able to speak to a group of women in the Wharton community. So my background, for those of you who don't know, I have now been dean for almost a year, 11 months, just about today. And prior to that, I was always been in higher education, spent many years at different kinds of business schools, but always in business education. So I was dean, as many of you know, at Emory University's Goizueta Business School. Before that, I was a faculty member in an area called Leadership and Organizational Behavior at Wharton. It's the management department. And as a faculty member, my research actually covered two different streams. One was on workplace diversity, and the other was on crisis leadership. And actually, those two areas melded really nicely together because I was introduced to the work of crisis management and crisis leadership through my research on diversity, recognizing that for so many companies who were facing challenges of acts of discrimination or allegations of discrimination, those instances really became a crisis for those companies. And the larger the array of challenges that they were facing, the more public they became. And then it's like the organization's dirty laundry was being aired very visibly in the media and other places. That then led to problems hiring and retaining and advancing women and minorities, which I just found that the process of that was fascinating to me. And I wanted to understand it as a person, as a woman, and as a person of color who was spending her life in organizations largely led by, and most of my colleagues were men. I wanted to understand the experience, not necessarily that I was having personally, but that so many people like me in similar kinds of organizations were experiencing. So that is my academic background. The road to Wharton as dean was not an intentional one necessarily. In fact, I refer to myself as the accidental academic. I was a psychology major in college, and the only reason I went to graduate school was I didn't know what kind of job I could get as an undergraduate psychology major, and I certainly didn't think that there was a job that I could afford to live on. So I delayed becoming an adult by essentially going to graduate school. I was pretty naive and actually didn't realize that the PhD degree was a degree that was preparing one to become a faculty member and to do research and to become a teacher, if you will. And it was about halfway through my program where I realized that's literally what I was being designed to do, what I was being geared to do or prepared to do. I left graduate school for a period of time before completing my PhD because I wanted to experience what it was like in corporate America. So I took some time out and I worked for American Express in New York for a while. And actually that was a pretty reaffirming decision. American Express is a great company. I'm sure most of you have or use the card or their services in some way or another. And it was really wonderful to me, for me to experience the corporate environment in such a well-run organization. But what it also led me to realize is that I felt a much greater and deeper purpose for my life actually staying in higher education and staying in university settings and being able to interact with young people and to influence the direction of them both academically and then also professionally. So it's been a tremendous career. And along the way, I was provided opportunities to demonstrate leadership. And each of those, I think, were successful enough that I became I was experiencing sort of the trajectory that led to deanships, but that was never at the outset something that I had intended to do. So it's I think I was prepared for the Wharton deanship, but I was not looking for the Wharton deanship. So that may resonate with some of you in your own careers. So let me pause there and either maybe open it up to questions or invite the facilitator to come back on.
Hi, Erica. Thank you so much for joining us. I'm so sorry we've had technical difficulties and somehow a maximum of 100 at capacity this morning. So forgive us.
No problem.
But we are thrilled to have you here and excited to have this conversation today. So thank you for sharing. I just hopped on again. Thank you for sharing a bit about your background. Do you want to, or Gayatri, are you on still? Sorry, I'm just joining.
Yep, I am.
Okay, great. Or did you, or where do we, I know I'm the one that's getting.
No, you're good. Dean James was just talking about how she kind of serendipitously stumbled upon this role as it related to just her following her passion to make change as it related to equity and inclusion. So I think we can double click on that maybe a little bit, and it segues pretty well into our first question about your background. So was there a specific person who inspired you to want to affect change in this way? And was there perhaps a pivotal moment where it felt like this was your calling and this is the space you wanted to affect change in? And I know this is a two-part question, but how did you seek out coaching and guidance in light of that inspiration or pivotal moment?
Well, great questions. I'll share first that I think for many of us, our parents or loved ones are oftentimes the first mentors, if you will, and the people that have tremendous influence on you early in life. So I grew up in Texas, and the fact that I had a mother who worked, unlike many of my friends whose mothers didn't work outside of the home, the norm for me was that one goes to school and one gets a job and one establishes a career. So I would say that my first mentor, if you will, professionally was really seeing my mother navigate her own professional journey. But I would say what I chose to do professionally was actually probably more influenced by my stepfather, who was a clinical psychologist. And I was intrigued by that field. I was intrigued by that work that he was doing and wanted to learn more about that, which is why I actually ended up studying psychology in college. I wasn't sure that I would be a clinical psychologist. And fortunately, while I was in college and graduate school, I learned about different disciplines of psychology. And for me, I loved the application of understanding human behavior in a practical setting like business or organizations. And so my degree is actually in organizational psychology. So I would say my parents were the most influential on me early in life. I mentioned earlier that I wasn't planning on pursuing an academic career, but the longer I spent in higher education, especially getting this PhD, the more I realized how powerful this degree could be for me personally, and that it really resonated with what I found to be important work to do. In particular, influencing the direction and the experiences of young people, and knowing how important education was for me to create a life and have be self-sustaining in terms of a professional journey, and being able to care for myself was something that I attribute my being in education. And I wanted to find a way to be able to give back in that same regard. So although I hadn't planned on becoming a faculty member, the experience of education in and of itself was very informative to me in terms of what I valued in life and the kind of work that I wanted to do. And you asked, I think, a third part to that question, but I may need you to repeat that.
Yeah, of course. It was the piece around what coaching you sought out when you made that connection to this being your calling. Because I think just in light of today's event, it is about connection, coaching, and fostering that sense of community for yourself.
Yeah, and I think what's interesting is that I don't recall ever explicitly seeking out coaching or guidance, but I have been very fortunate over my journey that people sought me out and naturally sort of offered support in ways that I didn't even know that I needed. So it's, as you say, you don't know what you don't know. I didn't know that I needed necessarily a mentor or a guide or a Sherpa, if you will, to help me navigate the experiences that I was having professionally. But fortunately, people were there for me. And once I saw the value that they were providing by being a sounding block, by having careers that I could emulate, then I started to be much more proactive. So I would say there was a graduate student professor that I had, or a graduate professor that I had, who was extremely valuable because she was, first of all, she was a she in the business school realm. And she was so well regarded and respected by her peers that I wanted to be in a position to experience that also. So she and I formed a nice relationship. And to this day, now 25 years later, she's still someone who reaches out to me and whom I reach out to for advice and guidance. I would also say it's been interesting that most of my now formal mentors, as we might describe them, have largely been white men. And that oftentimes surprises people because you assume that you would be sought out by, or you would seek people who are similar to you, who could share in the same kinds of experiences. And yet it's been people who were largely quite different from me in a variety of different domains who have been the most proactive in wanting to support my career and helpful in being able to support my career. So that's, if there are any advice that I would offer, it's recognizing that support and guidance and mentorship can come from a variety of sources, and that we should not limit ourselves to thinking we should look to a certain kind of person to help us.
I'd love to ask a follow-up on that because I can certainly relate. When I was at Wharton, I was reflecting on even the people who supported me in getting there, and it was a lot of straight white male partners at my firm. And so I'd love to hear your take on what we can do to encourage women of color or individuals who are less represented in those leadership roles to actively seek out mentorship of others, especially in the Wharton community, as we're graduating more leaders into those roles.
So I think that there are a couple things that we need to consider. One is we are more likely to receive the support that we need if we are seen as people who are valuable within our organizations. And if we recognize that any relationship is mutual and the objective should be both a give and a get. Oftentimes when we think about mentoring relationships, we assume that the goal is to find someone who can help us, and that is in and of itself the end result. And what I've observed and experienced over the years is we also, even if as the mentee, people need to feel as if they will gain from a relationship with us as well. And so finding people that we want to contribute to their life as much as we hope they will contribute to us is, I think a really important aspect of building the kinds of relationships that can be most supportive and helpful and generative to what it is that we're trying to achieve professionally.
Great. Well, thank you. I want to make sure that we have enough because we started a little bit late today. I want to make sure we have enough time for Q&A. So one last question we'll ask here, and then we'll turn it over to the audience. But really it's around, coming out of this pandemic, you've been in this role for a little over a year now. You've seen a lot. You came in at a very interesting moment in history, and I think rose to the occasion in some really beautiful ways. And I just love to hear more about what are some of the ways, like we have a very concerted group of, active, interested Wharton women on this call today. So what are some of the ways that, post-pandemic that this group can engage with the school? And what do you think that looks like, or re-engage with the school?
Well, thank you for asking that question. One of the things that I've learned about Wharton is that it is truly a community. It's a family, and that people who have experienced Wharton, either as a current student or as alumni, that the bond to the school and to each other is incredibly strong. So one of the, I think, interesting things about my being in a leadership role as dean right now is, as Wharton's first female dean, it's receiving quite a bit of attention. And some people might shy away from that or don't want to be acknowledged for the differences that they're bringing. But I think in this moment in time, when there's so much attention already around the country and around the world on diversity, I think the more we can have women in particular, women of color, people of color, who perhaps were less represented, to use the phrase earlier, during their time as students here, engage with the school to allow our current students to know we're out there, that there is support, that there are people who have been through what they are now going through, and that there will be a network of colleagues and friends and family to support them when they leave Wharton, as they navigate their own careers. So if there's an aspect of engaging with our students that is interesting to you, please reach out and let us know, because there are so many different opportunities for that to happen. And I don't think that there's anything more valuable that I do than help prepare our students to go into the workplaces that you all are now members of and leading, and ensuring that they're coming to you with all of the skills and the experiences that are necessary to be successful for your organizations.
Great. Well, thank you. We are all, as you know, a concerted group of Wharton, we are thrilled to have you here. And thank you for joining us today and just sharing a bit. And again, apologies about all the technical difficulties, but I would love to open up to the audience now to get some questions in before we turn it over to Caitlin. So go ahead, Dara, you're up.
Hi, how are you? And great to meet you. I'm very excited for you taking over as dean. What plans does Wharton have to further support women founders?
So there's an initiative that we are preparing for that is really focused on equity. And equity takes many different forms, but one of the forms that there's a lot of interest in is to support budding entrepreneurs and making sure that they have access to the capital, the network, the resources, the academic information to be successful in their ventures. So a part of equity is recognizing that so many women founders don't have the same level of access oftentimes to the venture capital or to the infrastructure that's necessary to be successful. And we're wanting to develop that infrastructure within the Wharton School so that as women founders come to us, we can help navigate their pathway into new ventures and entrepreneurship.
Thank you. All right, Sandy, you're up. Sandy Lee.
Hi, thank you very much, Dean, for this wonderful webinar and presentation. I similarly had the experience where a majority of my mentors were actually white men. And I agree with you that if you are seen as valuable within the organization, and you have a good give and get, you get that attention and mentorship. My question was actually, I had a different experience, which was also, I guess, echoed by others that I've worked with and coached, where we've actually encouraged, or we've actually encountered situations where women in the exact same workforces are actually the ones that are, potentially in competition or bringing you down, right? And that was an experience that I was curious to get your thoughts about. In forums like this, women are supportive, it's wonderful. But when you're actually going head to head in a lot of competitive industries, finance being a big one of them, women aren't actually in your corner. And I'd be curious to get your thoughts and maybe even personal experiences there.
Yeah, I hear that oftentimes. I personally have not been in environments where that has been true, but I certainly know that that is the case in many industries and organizations. And I think it says, I think it has more to do with the culture of that organization or the culture of that industry than it might have to do with the individual women themselves, right? Because I don't think I'm completely naive, but I will say that my inclination is to believe that most people have good intentions. And if they're engaging in ways that are inconsistent with what we would perceive as positive intentions for themselves and for others, then it's likely that they're in an environment that has fostered or encouraged or rewarded the kind of behavior that you're describing. And I would be cautious not to necessarily assume that it is the intention of the women whose behavior you're finding disappointing, as much as it is a culture that rewards such behavior, which actually might be indicative of not just the women in that culture, but the men as well. And those are environments that I don't find particularly healthy. And unless you are in a position to leverage sort of the sphere of influence that you have to operate differently, I think we have to make decisions for ourselves and put ourselves in places that are healthy and where we can strive. And if we're surrounded by or in environments that don't allow us to operate in that way, it might be more fruitful and productive to change our environment as opposed to trying to change the individuals or the culture within that environment.
And as a follow-up with that, corporate politics, territorialism, those kinds of dominant practices of power, those are going to exist in any large organization. So you're right, whether it's a man or a woman exhibiting that, that is going to happen. However, sometimes when there are fewer women and it's being seen woman to woman, that effect or impact can be felt a lot stronger. So
exactly. Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
And rather than just leaving every time that happens, is there advice that you'd have of how women might deal with that better?
So I think that the clearest advice is to engage with the other women in the organization and sort of build a coalition, because it's not going to be fruitful for there to be competition amongst you, but it could be very productive if there's a coalition or an alignment of people who want to see a difference made within the organization. And it may be hard for one person to make a difference, but it is more difficult, or it becomes easier if 2 people, it becomes more easier if there are 20 people. But you have to be like-minded and organized to present a different way of operating that is more supportive, but that will require people to actually reach out to the women that they might actually feel like they're in competition with.
That's a great point. Melinda Gates also talks about that in her book, Moment of Lift, about how she did that at Microsoft and how it was you had to make a concerted effort to try to actually change the culture. Otherwise, it wasn't going to do it for you. Okay, going through questions here. We have I see a lot of hands up. So Manisha Gupta, do you want to go?
Yeah, absolutely. Very nice to meet you, Dean Erika, and for the session. So I actually lead the People Analytics product suite for Oracle, and I wanted to see, I've been to the events that we do. My belief is Wharton is leading in terms of academia when it comes to people analytics, and also all the things we just discussed, culture and diversity, inclusion. There's a lot of talk, but things move in the professional world when there is analytics and the right kind of matrix, right? So if there is interest, I would love to do something with Wharton and take it in the direction, because through Oracle and through Wharton's partnership, I think a lot can be achieved. Otherwise, what I've seen is basically at 3 levels. At the board level, if you can put the right kind of perspective in front of them. At the managerial level, if you can incentivize them that diversity and inclusion is beyond compliance and talks, it really benefits economically, right? If you just match what we are trying to do with the incentives they carry, things just move faster. So that's something I would love to, double click and take up the conversation forward.
I would welcome that. And perhaps afterwards we can connect both personally, but also institutionally around people analytics. You've actually been to one of our people analytics conferences. I haven't experienced it yet, but I know that they are powerful powerful platforms to bring both the academic side of analytics together with the actual work that's being done in corporations. And so I believe that there's probably more we can do together.
And my journey was, serendipitous as well. So I ventured in this space not because I have an HR background, I'm a technologist, but I was leading a global team, and the only subjective conversations we had were around people who knew whom and what perceptions they carried, right? So, and then I was talking to the finance folks, and they were very objective. And I feel objectivity is like the ultimate luxury a human being can actually carry sometimes. Mm-hmm. So providing that perspective to the world became a little bit of a purpose, and things happened. So definitely. So yeah, I'll leave my email address or something. You guys have all my emails, so we'll find a way to connect. Thank you.
Thank you.
I believe Gail is next. I think Gail's had.
Or Gail, sorry, Gail, please go.
No problem. Yeah, it's pronounced Gayla. Erika, hello.
I apologize. Sorry for that, Gayla.
No problem. It doesn't look like how it's pronounced, Gayla. Dean, Erika, thank you so much for your leadership. One, I wanted you to know that I've launched a fund called the Walkstar Fund that specifically invests in women of color tech startups. I'm based in New York, so feel free to reach out to me. I'd love to help with that initiative that you spoke of. And I'd love at some point that we're investing in some of the entrepreneurs that you were speaking of. So feel free to reach out. I'm raising my hand.
Absolutely, thank you.
But my question is around curricula. So much of what we talk about around racial and gender equality and equity happens at the system and institutional level. And so I just wonder how you think about that in terms of curriculum, what's being taught in the classroom, how we're shaping the minds of the future business leaders that are going to come out of the university. Any thoughts around that? Any things we should?
Oh, yes. That has been very top of mind for a while, actually. And one of the wonderful things about coming to the Wharton School, I did not know what to expect in terms of where Wharton was on its own journey around diversity and inclusion and equity. And I came here and very quickly realized that there are many faculty who are not only committed to this work in theory, but whose research is focused on this area, and many faculty who are engaging in these issues in their classrooms. There are faculty in some of our finance courses, faculty in some of our economic courses, faculty obviously in our management courses, but across many academic domains. The other thing I'm noticing is that the students have an expectation now that their curriculum is inclusive of topics related to diversity, equity, and inclusion. So what we see is this perfect storm, but in a positive way, of both our faculty, this generation of faculty that are much more comfortable and receptive to engaging students around diversity. And we have the student population that is expecting this. So I think if you were to be at the Wharton School now versus perhaps 10 years ago, you would experience a more richly inclusive set of classes or opportunities for engagement with faculty and staff on matters of diversity than what may have been true a decade ago.
Awesome. And I come down now and again and do guest lectures. So I see what you are talking about. That's awesome.
Great.
Thank you. Miriam, okay, you are officially up now. And then Pamela, you're next. Miriam, you're still on mute.
There we go. Hi, Shannon, and hi, Dean James. Thank you so much for being with us today. I have a little bit of a different question. I'm curious from just about your entrepreneurial passions. If there's a business that you've seen lately that you wished you had started, or if there's ever been a business idea you had and didn't launch that maybe it was something, joking around with your friends, like curious from that perspective.
So if there was a business that I wish I had started, I would say Zoom.
You and all of us combined.
Exactly, exactly. Yeah. Um, let's see. So if there's something, you know, I think we're living in very interesting times that have just been heightened by this pandemic because the need for innovation has become so apparent, right? And whatever was happening has been sped up as a result of the pandemic. And I think we've seen over the past 10, 15 years an increase in the level of entrepreneurial activity. But as a dean and having been a faculty member, the number of students now who are looking for access to entrepreneurial content in their business school curriculum has grown exponentially in a very short period of time. So I see my role as less about what would I personally like to launch and how do I create an environment that allows young people to have the freedom and the flexibility to launch what they are most passionate about. So, you know, I think I'm not the entrepreneur, but my goal is to create entrepreneurially minded people, whether they start their own organization or whether they're going into organizations that require people to think much more creatively, to think much more innovatively, to be able to be more agile and flexible than some of the bureaucratic organizations that we are accustomed to. So I think that's my contribution to the world of entrepreneurism right now.
That's a big one. Well, thank you.
That is a big one. And Pamela, you're up.
Thank you. Hello, Dean Erika. So nice to meet you. And I was very enthusiastic about joining this today with your career and hearing you. And I was wondering now how you feel confidence has been relevant for you during your journey. I mean, being confident on yourself, and how do you think that has developed over your journey, and whether it has had ups and downs or you know, situations where this was relevant?
Yeah, no, it is such a relevant question because this has surfaced for me quite a bit recently. My husband described me once as, what did he say? A risk taker that lacked confidence, and that, which may seem like an oxymoron. But what he observed was that I was always willing to take a risk in something, whether it was professionally or, you know, to go for something that I, you know, may have seemed risky, but I never really articulated confidence that it was going to work out. So, but together, I think it made for a really interesting combination. And it's only been after, you know, in my late 40s when I saw a pattern that my willingness to take risks and assume roles that I lacked confidence in myself and being able to do, doing them actually helped foster the confidence in me. So over time, I've gotten out of this habit or this cycle of thinking that, yeah, I'm going to try this, but it's not going to work out. It's going to fail, or I'm not going to succeed. Because now I have ample evidence to say, I'm going to try this. And oh, by the way, it did succeed. And that time I succeeded as well. And that time it worked out for the positive as well. And so I think once I had evidence of having successful outcomes for things that I took a risk in doing, that's when my confidence started to become much more pronounced. And now I feel like I'm able to assume, like, obviously becoming the dean of the Wharton School, the largest business school in the world, the most historic, the oldest business school in the world. You know, 5 years ago, 10 years ago, there's no way I would have assumed that I would be in this role. And yet now, even though I entered it with a bit of fear and trepidation, I also realized I have a track record of being able to figure things out. And I assumed at this point, I'll know how to figure things out. What I did not anticipate was that I would be figuring it out in the midst of a pandemic and being a year in and still having not met my colleagues and those kinds of things. But that too, we figured out, right? So my confidence has evolved over the years, but to your point, there were definitely times in my life where I lacked confidence, but I never let my lack of confidence prevent me from trying something new.
It's a great way for us to end the Q&A portion. I see that we have a few more entering in as we speak, but I want to, no, Dean James, thank you so much for joining today. And just, I think that the confidence especially is the one thing that all women across the board, like we struggle with for whatever reason. And I think there's one thing that we can edit out of our DNA, it's that, like, and it just comes with training. So how do we reprogram it? And I think one way to do that, I think, is what you were even saying, circling back to the beginning of the conversation, is really around how can the women, especially Wharton women today, come together to support each other on our professional journeys, whatever that might be, whatever that might look like. And so Caitlin on our team today is actually going to be introducing a new tool along with two women who have already tested out a pilot that is designed to specifically do that, connect Wharton women on topics that are relevant to them through this AI-enabled product that I'll let Caitlin speak to just now for a moment.
Awesome. Thank you, Shannon. And thank you, Dean James. I'm going to, I can't actually share my screen. It looks like we did prepare some slides. No worries, I can talk through it and maybe we can circulate the slides a bit later. But one of our goals at WAFFA this year is to connect over 5,000 Wharton women to build that connected network and support system that we talked about. So we're very excited to announce the launch of Orbit, which is going to be a monthly curated AI-powered algorithm to connect you one-on-one with WAFFA peers, from founders to funders and Wharton women around the world. All of the logistics such as scheduling, video, chat link, and even suggested agenda for discussion topics will be provided. So it's really a quick 20-minute session with someone that might help you or support you, or if you needed someone to talk to build your network. And super easy. Once we'll launch it, you'll receive an invitation from orbit.ai to opt in, and then you'll receive your match a week later for you guys to select a time to meet. And with us today, I believe we have Diane, Marina, and Anita, who participated in our pilot program several weeks ago. I'm going to call on one of those folks to see if they want to share their journey or the experience with Orbit.
So yeah, they're just going to share the conversations so we tested this product last month, and we had these 3 women that are coming on today, and Vivian actually couldn't get into the room because of the cap, but Vivian was trying to get in earlier. And we're better at the product end of this than we are on Zoom today, apparently. But we have, we just love to share some of the stories that came out of these conversations, because we'd love everyone on this call to also join in and just, and give us your feedback. Like, we're testing this out too, but we're figuring out how do we have this really smart, really concerted group of Wharton women who care. And so how do we bring those people together around this theme of engineered serendipity to connect with each other, to learn from each other, to be sounding boards and resources for one another? So go ahead, guys.
Hi, should I start? This is Diane.
Please, Diane, jump in.
Hi, thank you so much, Shannon, and Erika, thank you so much. It's been such a pleasure listening to you speak, and I just miss Philly so much, and I miss Penn so much. So it's really cool to put this together. So thanks to this platform, I connected with Marina, and I own a marketing and PR company, and I'm based between California and Arizona. And I connected immediately with Marina, and we just had a host of things in common, from on a personal level, just kind of talking a lot about what's going on in the world and sharing kind of how we've gotten through the last year. And then, that evolved into an in-person meeting where we brainstormed how we could potentially collaborate on one of Marina's projects. And so we are just like, since our first call where we just completely hit it off, we've been in touch and kind of figuring out how we can help each other and collaborate in different ways. And I'm super excited to meet just other like-minded women who just get it, who can execute, who are just direct, no BS, who just, want to get things done. And, when I meet another kind of like-minded executor, it's always really exciting. So I'm just so grateful to the platform and so grateful to meet Marina, and excited to see kind of, what comes out of our new relationship and new relationships on this platform.
Great. Thank you, Diane.
Of course.
And does Marina want to go too? Marina, do you want to share
Sure.
the fun of that conversation?
Sure, happy to. I'm here. So yes, thank you all, Dean James, Shannon, for a wonderful presentation. Yes, so I was paired with Diane through the Orbit platform. I think there are a couple of things about this tool that were, really special in this pairing. I mean, it's one thing to meet somebody with whom you have a professional synergy. I have been running a consumer business for a few years. I also advise other startups. And Diane, as she mentioned, she runs a marketing agency. So on one hand, there's this synergy on paper, but on the other hand, when you're paired with somebody, you're both women, you're both Wharton alumni, you're in the same city, you have kind of this additional, you have the same, both being alumni of Wharton, I think put us in the same boat in terms of how we operate in business, what our kind of ethos is around work and around metrics and around execution. We were just kind of immediately on the same page in ways that I would not have been if I was miscellaneously, paired to speak with maybe somebody who runs a marketing, service or agency just from randomly, from somewhere in the country. So yeah, I think having a tool that allows women with our, academic background paired really allows you to speed right through a number of hurdles that you'd ordinarily have in a professional intro. So I really appreciated that. And like Diane said, I just look forward to using the platform more, really getting it out to more people, because I guess I've personally seen the value of it in creating a professional relationship, also now a friendship. And I think it's incredibly powerful to put women with our backgrounds together and give us the opportunity to explore what can be made of those relationships.
Great, thank you. Thank you so much. And then I think we have Anita, and I just saw Vivian just joined too. Do you guys want to share a little bit about your conversations?
Sure, I'm happy to share a little bit about what we discussed. So I'm Anita Sekar. Nice to see everyone today. I work at a biotech company in the Bay Area, and I was paired with Vivian Chen, who is a founder of a recruiting startup based out of New York. And we spent a few minutes kind of just chatting, just trying to get a little bit friendly, kind of introduce each other and talk a little bit about our respective jobs. And then Vivian was telling me about her startup and how she's initiated a few different pilot programs with some healthcare companies in New York. And a few of those companies were actually in the same space as my company. And so I was kind of intrigued by that. And I thought, it might be helpful for me to connect her with our HR team at my company, or at least pass along information on her startup and, perhaps get her more exposure to some companies in the Bay Area. So I was able to at least, forward kind of the teaser for her company to my HR team. And, they are kind of in the process of evaluating some of these new tools. So still, to be determined what may come of that connection. But, I thought it was just a really great way for me to be able to kind of give back to the Wharton community by facilitating that type of connection.
Thank you. Engineered serendipity at its best. And Vivian, are you on? Did you come on, Vivian? I thought I saw you come in. Maybe not. Maybe that's where we're ending it. Okay, well, thank you, Anita. I know we're approaching the 1 p.m. mark here. Erika, do you have any final any closing remarks or anything you'd like to leave with this group, this small but mighty group now? I know we might need to do we'll send out a recap of this, because I know we had a considerable more registrants than we had at the 100 cap mark. So we will follow up with that. But yeah, just closing words for this group today.
Well, I would just say thank you. You are Wharton's biggest and best ambassadors. So the more that you represent yourselves so professionally, that reflects back on the school. And we want to continue to be supporting you and your efforts in whatever way we can, but also please know that everything that you're doing is also supporting the brand of the Wharton School. So I'm just incredibly grateful and so pleased that you spent some of your afternoon with me and as a part of this effort. So thank you.
Well, thank you so much. We will be following up with everyone who joined today, both registered and then also and hopped on the call with links on how to sign up for Orbit. So look for that. All right. Thank you so much, Dean James.
Thank you.
Take care. Bye. Bye, all.